So now I'd like to introduce the moderator for our first Power Keynote panel, Liz Sarah. So Liz has more than 25 years of experience in the local high-tech community as an entrepreneur, business leader, and an angel investor. Since founding Best Marketing LLC in 2001, she's consulted with more than 90 early-stage and growth tech companies on their go-to-market strategies, delivering increased revenue, market adoption, and brand awareness for their B2B products and solutions. She previously co-founded and grew an e-commerce software company to $25 million when it was sold. Something that probably there's a lot of us in the room that would be like, that would be nice. Let's build this to sell. And she's going to provide some insight on that. In July 2018, she was appointed chairman of the board of the National Women's Business Council, which is a federal agency that advocates for female founders. She's the immediate past board chair of the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship here at University of Maryland, and she's also an adjunct professor in the Smith School of Business. She's a mentor of CEOs, working in incubators and accelerators, and a frequent author and conference speaker on topics like you're going to hear this morning. So please, let's give a warm welcome for Liz Sarah.
Well, thank you, Julie, and good morning. I'm really excited to be here to discuss a topic near and dear to my heart, money. And for all of you entrepreneurs in the room, you know how important capital is. So let me introduce two men who control a lot of money in our ecosystem. They will join me on the podium as our conference speakers this morning. So Justin Klein is a co-founder and managing partner at VENSANA Capital, a venture capital and growth equity investment firm dedicated to partnering with entrepreneurs who seek to transform healthcare with breakthrough innovations in medical technology. Justin was previously a partner at NEA, one of the largest and most active venture capital firms in the world. Justin also worked at the Duke University Health System, where his experience included roles in strategy, finance, and operations, as Duke built one of the nation's first integrated healthcare delivery systems. Also joining us this morning as we talk about money is Bob Ackerman. He's referred to as one of cyber's money men by major business publications for his experience and leadership in venture capital investing in cybersecurity startup tech companies. He has been named one of technology's top 100 investors by Forbes magazine. With 20 plus years of experience as a VC, Bob is the founder and managing director of Silicon Valley-based cybersecurity venture capital firm, ALLEGISCYBER Capital, and the co-founder of Columbia, Maryland-based cyber startup Foundry Data Tribe. So with that, we're going to get this conversation about money going. So let's start off. We'd like to hear from both of you on your own journey to becoming an investor. How are you doing this today? Where did you start? And tell us about that path. Just to kick it off.
Sure. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. And I want to thank TEDCO and everybody for hosting us here. It's really a great opportunity to be with all of you and more of you one-on-one after we're done here up on stage. I'm also particularly excited to have the chance to try to say something creative enough to make it onto the graphic artist board. So I may play a game with myself just to see if I can say something just outrageous enough to make it on there. We'll see. So I'm a venture capital investor, and so my focus is helping partner with entrepreneurs as their kind of financial partner, hopefully also a strategy partner, particularly in the healthcare space. And my area of interest has been medical technologies, which we define as medical devices, potentially digital health or tech-enabled services businesses, kind of anything outside of drug development, frankly, that has the opportunity to impact healthcare in some kind of positive way, clinically, economically, et cetera. I am a physician by training and found my way to venture capital through a very indirect path. I actually grew up in Columbus, Ohio, where even though I was graduating college, really at the peak of the tech internet bubble in the late 90s, I had no idea about startups, venture capital, Silicon Valley. I mean, literally zero awareness whatsoever. But I was committed to healthcare. I was interested in going to medical school. And over time, and through work experience, as well as just having the opportunity to kind of explore different ways in which one could pursue leadership opportunities in healthcare, I came to appreciate the intersection of innovation and technology and healthcare. And again, through medical school, including 3 different summer internships, which I really very actively pursued to try to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I learned about Silicon Valley. I learned about startup companies versus big companies. And then in thinking about all the different roles that one could play as part of that ecosystem, discovered that venture was a really interesting way for me to apply my background, to work with a number of different entrepreneurs in the pursuit of technologies and new ideas that I found really exciting. And eventually got the opportunity to do a summer internship at NEA in their Baltimore office, which was really my first introduction to venture. That went well. I really enjoyed it, had a great experience there. And at the end of last year, ultimately decided that it was time for me to be a little more entrepreneurial and start a new venture capital firm. So I partnered with a really good friend that I've been doing venture with for about 13 years for another firm. We started VENSANA Capital and just closed our first fund and are actively in the market now, looking at new medtech startups and hoping to help our ecosystem.
So those internships really matter, though, I guess, what we're hearing.
For sure.
Bob, what about your path to where you are today?
Well, I'm probably a little more sort of the traditional Silicon Valley story. Before you come, we thank TEDCO for including me as well. TEDCO's been a great partner for us at DataTribe. And, as we've tried to catalyze this ecosystem, finding kindred spirits has been a real challenge. Kindred spirits that could write checks, that actually know what they're doing, turned out to be even more difficult. And we found that kindred spirit in TEDCO. So, it's phenomenal to see the growth in this program and the success that TEDCO really has enabled in the Maryland ecosystem. So thank you. In terms of my own journey, I'm a Silicon Valley guy. So, computer science background, built a couple of companies in Silicon Valley. One of those built the original iPhones, and the other was really geeky compiler stuff. But along the way, I had a chance to be back by some of the best venture capitalists in the business. Guys at Sequoia and Dick Brown with an NEA. And, learned a lot about not just the technology side of building a business, but learning how to look at the business of building businesses through their perspectives. And, both the Sequoia guys and Dick have always, encouraged me at some point in time to think about jumping to the other side and bringing my entrepreneurial experience to the venture capital side of the community. Because frankly, most venture capitalists, they don't have a lot of operating experience. They haven't actually built companies. And my own perspective was, going back to, Myra, some of your opening comments, and unless you've laid awake at 2 in the morning, wondering, how do I make payroll next month? You have no clue what it takes to build a business. I teach, new venture finance, the MBA program at UC Berkeley, and as good as that program is, and as good as the program is at Stanford, when it comes to entrepreneurial studies, there are things you just can't teach, that you have to experience, you have to be able to internalize. Unless you've experienced and internalized it, you really can't pass the benefit of those experiences onto other entrepreneurs and help them map their way through that mindset. So, after a career as a successful entrepreneur, I did what most entrepreneurs did. I wasn't ready to quit, but I wanted to change. I wanted to do something a little bit different. And that led to the founding of Allegis, basically 22 years ago at this point in time. And so Allegis today is best known for cybersecurity. We've been investing in cybersecurity for 20 years. We were the first venture firm to focus exclusively on cybersecurity in the world. We did the first dedicated cybersecurity fund in the world, and it really became an area that we understood quite well, where we got a lot of success consistently. And it was that exposure to cybersecurity, principally in Silicon Valley, that actually led to my activities in Maryland and led to what we're doing at DataTribe in Maryland. And for many years, we would find some of the most talented, principally offensive engineers working at the National Security Agency, and we would bring them to Silicon Valley. And our playbook basically says, if you want to build cutting-edge defense, you start with cutting-edge offense. They're in the mindset of the attacker. They understand the attacker's playbook, and nobody can better defend against an attacker than a former attacker. And going back about 4 years ago, it got to a point, just from an economics perspective, that we really couldn't afford to bring engineers out of the NSA out to Silicon Valley anymore. You know, the cost of doing business in Silicon Valley are phenomenally well documented. An engineer leaving the NSA making $138,000 a year, married, 1 or 2 kids, having a home, I can't move them to Silicon Valley. I can triple their compensation and I can't move them to Silicon Valley. And so we made a decision to flip the playbook. It was, okay, we're going to put Silicon Valley in a box and we're going to drop it right next to the NSA. And much to the early chagrin of the NSA, wasn't really sure if that was a good idea or not. I think what we've demonstrated is that with Data Tribe, which we described as a cybersecurity startup foundry, we actually can be good partners. And our objective at Data Tribe really is to leverage cutting-edge cyber expertise, particularly on the offensive or deep data science sides of the equation, where government innovation is not an oxymoron. It's actually the truth. I will tell you, in cybersecurity, government research labs are running 5 to 7 years ahead of industry, and they're way ahead of Silicon Valley. And so we just basically moved to the source, of that DNA and put the missing elements in this ecosystem into a box. I'm not trying to change everybody and everything at once, but put enough of the ecosystem together that we can start 3 or 4 startups a year with these cutting-edge innovators that we used to take to Silicon Valley. And over the last 4 years now, we've started 12 companies. All of those companies have gone on so far to be successful. Some people may know Dragos as one of the first companies we started, but it really is, for me, I continue to think of myself as an entrepreneur. People say, well, I'm a recovering entrepreneur. You never really stop being an entrepreneur. But it allows me to take my entrepreneurial background, my experience in venture finance, and bring it to creating an entrepreneurial environment in Maryland around the domain where we practice in cybersecurity. And maybe we'll get a little bit more into why Maryland when it comes to cybersecurity. But what I found is just an abundance of opportunity, an abundance of natural resource, particularly in the human capital that sits in Maryland. But like any emerging market or any frontier market, there's a lot of critical infrastructure that's just not here yet. You see hints of it, you see bits and pieces of it, but it's not here yet. Part of our task at Data Tribe is to provide an origin star to guide others and to be able to convince people the sources of capital around the world that really is the grease that makes the machine run, to understand what is the opportunity here. Or why should they be looking at Maryland, particularly when people are looking at alternatives to what's going on in Silicon Valley.
So that's a really good segue into us understanding why did you decide to focus on cybersecurity? Was it a planned decision, or did you do a few deals and they happened to be cyber companies and then decided to continue with that? Which came first?
Well, we did make two cyber investments and we were consistently good at it. So a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing. You make your own luck, and you make yours, and we had the pleasure of working with were just world-class folks. In venture capital, a lot of times people say you trace the success of a firm back to a single investment. And if that's true, that single investment for us was a company called Iron Corp, which is the best management team I've ever worked with. And when we made the investment, I told my guys, I said, look, 5 of these leaders are going to go on to be CEOs. Today, 8 of those leaders have gone on to be CEOs. So you basically followed the gene pool. And that turned out to be really good for us. Then we had about 7 years ago, we had one of our investors, an institutional investor from a neighboring state, who said, asked me a question. He said, have you ever looked at everything you've ever done and looked for patterns? And it was clear by the way that he asked the question that he had and I had not. And so we went and looked at that, everything we've done and looked at the pattern. The pattern was we're really good at cybersecurity. We're consistently good at cybersecurity. I think part of it is it's a combination of our operating background, but our deep technical background. And I had done a lot of security-related work, and so there was sort of a natural affinity for us in both with the entrepreneurs and with the technology. And so at that point in time, we made a conscious decision to shift 100% to cybersecurity. And that was met with some snickers. People say, that's a little niche, it's a little specialized and not a little focused. When we did, I think that was funny, 4 years later, we did the first dedicated cyber fund in the world. And that was actually 2 years ago, 4 years ago we did this. And people said, that's way too narrow. Cyber is a niche. What are you doing? What kind of strategy is that? And our point was, you don't understand cyber. Cyber is not vertical. Cyber is horizontal. The entire world is shifting to a globalized digital economy. And if there's a microprocessor and there's data involved, there's a cyber threat involved. So cyber is about as broadly horizontal as you can possibly manage. And it is totally countercyclical. and it's also totally defensive. So the NASDAQ's off 50% tomorrow, cyber budgets are not affected, they're up and to the right. And so it's a series of those observations that really keep to the credit of my investor from the state of Delaware, who really got us thinking about things that we hadn't thought about. And, it forced us to do the analysis. We're grateful for Ted's support. And, once you get into it, you begin to think of things a little bit differently. And like any business, right, in some ways a bit of a pivot in our strategy. But pivoting to our strength, and it took the catalyst of somebody who knew us well, to kind of poke us to think a little bit differently. And so it's a combination of experience, success, but it's an outside influence.
So Justin, tell us about your focus in healthcare. We can understand with your background as a physician, the interest in healthcare, but healthcare is very broad. What kinds of products or solutions or what, you're within that whole healthcare ecosystem, where are you focused in investing?
So as a firm, I think our mandate is anything we describe as fitting under the umbrella of medical technology or med tech. And for us, that basically means anything outside of drug development. I think there's a kind of special set of qualities and characteristics in investing in drug development plays that are fairly distinguished from a lot of other healthcare or technology product-oriented businesses in healthcare. For us, I think our bread and butter is really medical devices. And so these are typically products that are FDA regulated and designed to address some kind of therapeutic issue for acute or chronic conditions. In general, we like to invest in things that do require real clinical studies to show their value. We think that's an important way in which we can create a market opportunity for a product that can be more durable, even sometimes than the IP associated with those products. But these are traditional medical device products for things like orthopedics or cardiovascular disease. Increasingly, we're looking at areas like neuromodulation, where we're stimulating or inhibiting the nervous system to affect the body in different ways. Material science can play a really important role in designing new medical devices. And I think ultimately this is an area that we personally are passionate about because there's a certain tangibleness of a medical device. You can think about how a device is going to interact during a surgical procedure or affect the body. Often it's a durable solution. And so when we think about some of our biggest challenges in healthcare today, they relate to the cost of drugs or the challenges of adherence and compliance with drug regimens and frankly just chronic disease in general. And so when we think about maybe there's an interventional or a surgical procedure or some kind of more durable medical device solution to a chronic disease, we think there can be a really compelling cost-effectiveness argument to it too. So we try to cast a pretty broad net and be very open-minded, but fundamentally it comes back to this same kind of thought around what's the value proposition that a new medical technology can bring to a healthcare need.
So is there a particular stage in the medical technology company's life cycle that you like to come in as an investor? Because in many of these products, it's a long development cycle to get it built, to get it to market, to get it through trials, et cetera. Where do you come in?
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, we're very much early stage investors. And from a career perspective, I think we've probably invested in about 35 different med tech companies. And they range from company creation and seed stage, partnering with a clinician scientist or maybe an experienced entrepreneur who wants to start a new company, but all the way to early revenue stage medical technology companies. I think for us, the phase in which we probably add the most value is something that's had some early clinical experience and is getting ready to approach the US development path. So maybe they're in early conversations with FDA about the type of pivotal trial that they want to go run. And that in particular is important because that is largely going to become their evidence base for convincing all the different stakeholders in our system that this medical technology solution is worth adopting. This could be physicians, patients, payers, even physicians that may refer patients in need of something more advanced than traditional conservative care. And so when you think about what goes into executing on a large clinical trial, there are a lot of facets that you want to be considerate of and think about the trial design. Having done this a number of times and navigated the path through regulatory approval and early market launch, including sometimes getting new codes and coverage and things like that that are necessary for new technologies to get reimbursed, I think we can think pretty holistically with a team about how to design the right clinical trial and set something up for a long-term opportunity in space. So that's really the point at which we think we can have the most value.
So Bob, regarding your cyber companies, where does your investment firm come in terms of stage?
Well, we actually, when we made the decision to focus on cyber exclusively, we took a very different approach to the marketplace. And typically, venture firms will identify themselves as early stage or growth stage or late stage or perhaps C stage. And, from our perspective, we had tremendous domain expertise in cyber. And we thought that trying to slice the market based on the phase of funding was a lost opportunity. So we actually flipped the playbook, and we haven't fully announced the platform, but have built a platform that focuses at the entire life cycle of venture financing. So if you look at what we do at Data Tribe, we start companies. So it is classic seed plus financing. And we think that's really consistent with what it takes to leverage the expertise that's in this market and develop the market and get those companies to a place where they're ready for the broader venture ecosystem to embrace them, short of moving them to Silicon Valley. Allegis is the venture platform. And later this year, and that's classically sort of Series A to Series C, next month we'll launch Night Dragon, which is our growth equity platform. So we've taken a very different approach, which is we're going to leverage our domain expertise, our global network, our knowledge of the marketplace, and capture as much value in cybersecurity as we can, regardless of its stage of development and regardless of where it's located geographically anywhere in the world. And that strategy led to us being backed by JP Morgan. So if you look at us next year, we're $1 billion, and it's all focused on cybersecurity. Half of that capital is JP Morgan. So we just took a fundamental, back to still being an entrepreneur, took a fundamentally different approach to the marketplace and said, okay, if we've got domain expertise, how do we optimize our leverage of that domain expertise to our greatest advantage? And so we play across all stages of development. The bulk of our activities focused in the U.S. Israel probably is number 2 from a cyber perspective. Number 3 is Europe, principally the UK. Those are sort of the 3 areas where you see cyber innovation in the world. The U.S. is probably 70% of the innovation investment, innovation development. Israel, I will probably put it about 20%. And the last 10% gets spread around with maybe 5% in the UK.
Let's talk about the check. How big? What's a typical deal investment that you're doing?
Well, so if you look at what we do at Data Tribe, again, we just tried Data Tribe as a foundry. So I used to joke, our business was about, finding 2 guys and a dog in a garage with a big idea to change the world, and the dog was the keeper. I don't say that to the engineers that we work with at Data Tribe, but it really is. We're starting companies where we've got 3 engineers that are what I call domain masters. They are the best in the world in their practice within cybersecurity. They are a byproduct of massive U.S. government investment over decades in developing the most advanced cyber capabilities in the world. So they are these domain masters. The guys at Dragos were the guys that were the experts in industrial control system security, countered the Russians when they took down the Ukrainian power grid. They're the guys that have identified all the attacks on critical infrastructure anywhere in the world. They are the best. What they don't know is anything about building a business. So when you sit down with these folks and say, okay, let's talk about use cases. What's a use case? Let's talk about a product roadmap. What's a product roadmap? Let's talk about go-to-market. What's that mean? And, if you go out to Silicon Valley, those are all known terms. They're all defined terms. Out here, because of the nature of the economy, so much of it in cyber being focused at government and government-related services, those muscles never really got developed. And so when we put that Silicon Valley in a box and moved it to Maryland and Data Tribe, the idea was it's not just about writing checks. And frankly, when we first came out here, I remember Mark O'Malley, when he was the governor, kept trying to convince me that it was just about money. I said, Mark, it's not about money. It's not about money. Money, if you have the talent, you will find the money. But it's about creating an ecosystem that pulls it together so that the talent can establish itself, can demonstrate its capabilities, and the capital will follow. So when we put Data Tribe together, my partner Mike Janke and I, it was about writing checks, but it was also about bringing all of the other skill sets that were necessary to fill in the experience gaps with these brilliant engineers that we tend to work with. So we typically, when we start a company at Data Tribe, initial capitalization will be $1.5 million to $2 million from us, which is bigger than a seed round in Silicon Valley, interestingly enough. But we're optimized for this market. We're not competing with Silicon Valley. But then we have a dedicated operating team of 12 that all have, a couple decades of experience as CEOs, chief marketing officers, chief technology officers, all of the commercial skills that these engineers need in order to transition their domain expertise into a viable business. And so, that foundry metaphor is, we're not a startup studio, even though we were described that way once upon a time, but we certainly are not an incubator. We're certainly not an accelerator. If you think about what a foundry is, it's about taking raw ingredients and blending them together, forging, something out of those raw ingredients. And that's basically what we do at DataTribe. But it's also what we found was necessary if we were to build companies here. The knock on Maryland, from a Silicon Valley perspective, is, first, number one perspective in Silicon Valley is they'll all move to Silicon Valley because we have the money, and there is truth in that. It is a lot easier to start a company in Silicon Valley than it is to start a company in Maryland. There is truth to that. That doesn't mean it's a better place. If you're building a cyber company, Maryland, in fact, is a better place to start a company because of the engineering count. There's 109,000 cyber engineers in the state of Maryland, largest concentration of cyber engineering in the world. In a business that fundamentally depends on cyber engineering expertise, and the more advanced, the better, this is the place to be. But that ecosystem to basically capitalize on that domain expertise and build leading world-class companies just hasn't been there. We're trying to tilt that balance, and not change the world overnight, but if we can find 3 or 4 companies, and make them successful, we've now done that for 4 years. What happens is the capital markets in Silicon Valley begin to pay attention. Entrepreneurs, operating executives that maybe aren't, trying to find good product management in Maryland is really tough. Trying to find good go-to-market expertise in Maryland, it's tough. But what happens is people begin to see that interesting things are happening in Maryland, and they're attracted to the opportunity. And so it's about building early successes, getting the word out, demonstrating what's going on in this ecosystem, and then let the natural progression, of capital and skills, seek their natural level in Maryland. So early stage, we're writing checks of $1.5 million to $2 million. Series C financings typically these days are $8 to $10 million. We typically syndicate those, or if we're doing a Series A financing, we're writing a $4 to $5 million check nominally. Series B, we're typically writing a $10 million check. We get to Series C, we'll go up to $20 million. When you get to growth equity, it's a whole other world. And then behind us, basically, if we want to take control positions or do something really significant, is JP Morgan. So we've got a very elastic capital structure, which is designed, to allow us to basically fit in each stage of development with the capital requirements, all leveraging that common framework of experience.
Justin, tell us about your typical deal size and where you're coming in, and what does that look like over the life of that portfolio company for you doing follow-on rounds?
Yeah, so in healthcare, the nature of, I think, startup finance is quite a bit different than tech. A lot of what we have to think about are funding multiple stages of value creation for an innovation, because most often, for a company to get public or to be acquired, you need to get that product into the U.S. market and show some adoption, i.e., measured by revenue, most often. And so depending on how early you start in the process, you can kind of map out the path to get to the U.S. market, whether there's clinical evidence, regulatory, market development hurdles. And in general, we try to think about participating in financing a company all the way through that process. Sometimes there may be an earlier exit, but as we kind of meter our commitments to each project, we want to be a lead investor for our companies and speak to somewhere between a third and half of that company's capital requirement. So for us, we think about opportunities in medtech where that total capital requirement is probably somewhere between $30 million and $100 million for one of our startups. It's worth noting that in medical devices, for example, the capital requirement can be more than double that, depending on how many hurdles you want to take on, especially if, for example, a large clinical trial and an FDA approval path and then the pursuit of new codes is all part of the process. That can take more than 10 years and a couple $100 million. For us, though, we think there are really attractive opportunities, in that $30 to $100 million range. And so for us as a firm, and working as part of a syndicate, we'd expect that we'll invest between $10 and $30 million per company. And how we allocate that over time really depends on the nature of the project. So in some cases, we'll start early with smaller checks in the single-digit millions. In other cases, we may get involved and write a $15 to $20 million check. In all cases, though, we'll be reserving capital for follow-ons and being prepared to see something all the way through to that U.S. market approach.
So for both of you, how do you find the companies? Do you look for them? Do they come to you? What is the typical matchmaking scenario?
I think for us, it's a bit of everything, right? I think we've tried to really be very active in our ecosystem, and so to some extent, we expect it's going to happen in all these different ways. There aren't many dedicated medtech investors, frankly, in the ecosystem over the last 10 years. There are probably less than 3 or 4 funds that have been raised with a real focus on medical devices and medical technology. So we already have a certain level of visibility in the field. I think second, we try to be pretty proactive in looking at specific markets and market needs where we recognize there are secular growth trends, multiple acquirers actively building out businesses and product portfolios in those categories, and still significant unmet needs where we think that a standalone company could, in fact, build a really compelling commercial business with a single product or maybe just a limited set of products versus competing with a fully built-out product portfolio like a Medtronic or a J&J have in the market. Similarly, though, we think these innovations could also fit inside of the portfolio of somebody that really does have a fully built-out business and the economies of scale that come with access to the commercial channel. So we think about it on both of those lines, and ultimately, the deeper we get and the more we're investing and frankly talking to people and exploring ideas, the more we proactively pursue new startups, and similarly, the more we hear about things. So there's kind of a natural give and take to that process.
Bob, your
I
experience?
think very similar story in a lot of ways. There are 4 specialty venture firms focused on cyber operating in the world today. We were the first. We have a reasonably high profile because of our early position in cybersecurity. My partner Dave DeWalt. Dave is arguably the most experienced cyber operating executive in the world. He was the CEO of Documentum. He was the CEO of McAfee. Sold them to Intel for $7.8 billion, and then took FireEye public. So we've got a high profile in the domain. We've been doing it long enough. Cyber, in fact, is a very, very small community. There was a report 4 years ago that was talking about cyber as money men. There were 10 of us, and so we all know each other. We tend to work together. It is a highly specialized domain. Though virtually every venture firm, worth its salt today talks about making cyber investments just because of the magnitude and the size of the opportunity. But as specialists, and with a history of some success, we have a fair amount of visibility. And so we see, the deal flow is frankly never an issue for us. But I think some of the more interesting stuff we do actually is the stuff that we do here, where we are not reacting to, canned Series A financing, but finding these teams that are domain masters that have been operating on the offensive side, where we can identify that offensive playbook is going to show up in the wild as an attack vector, sometime in the near future. And we need to take these offensive guys and anticipate those attacks and build defensive capabilities. We can do that here. We can't do that in Silicon Valley. That expertise just does not exist within Silicon Valley. And we do that at Data Tribe. The other thing we do at Data Tribe is we have ideas of where we want companies. If you spend enough time in this market, you understand, how's the market evolving, where the attack vector is going to move to, what are the next threats going to look like, how are we going to counter those threats. So we have a list of things that we think need to get built. And frankly, we go shopping for that expertise. Don't tell my friends at the NSA about this. But we go shopping for that expertise wherever we can find it. And in many cases, because of the advanced nature of what we're working on, that expertise is coming out of a government research lab someplace within the intelligence community. So we have a lot of organic ideas that we develop. We certainly, catalyze, brilliant engineers coming out of the intelligence community, and then we've got a very broad network just that operates globally. What's interesting about Data Tribe is last year, actually 22% of the opportunities, we looked at about 300 opportunities. We start 3 companies a year. So 22% of what we looked at last year actually was Silicon Valley coming out to Maryland and Data Tribe. You know, a combination of, I think, the reputation of Data Tribe and the skill set of Data Tribe, which really doesn't have an equal in Silicon Valley. So it's a combination of things that, you know, you build the brand, demonstrate the expertise, build a culture for really rolling up your sleeves and working with entrepreneurs, and not being, I always tell people, we're not investment managers, we build companies. And so that reputation really resonates with entrepreneurs, and that's what we try to be. And I think we're reasonably good at it. And what it does is it allows us to work with first-time entrepreneurs, but we also find people that are experienced, that are coming back and doing their second, third, or fourth time, you know, tend to seek us out because of our expertise and because of our style.
So last question before we open it up to the audience. What advice can you give the entrepreneurs sitting here who are about to go out and look for funding, or maybe are in the process of it? From where you sit at the table, you know, what 2 or 3 things can you tell them is important for you to know about their company when you're in those kinds of investment-related conversations?
Well, I think for me, the best conversations are ones where there's really kind of an exchange of ideas. And what I look for, frankly, is an entrepreneur that has insight into their market. Because the healthcare product development, you know, as we all know, healthcare is incredibly complex. There's so much noise, it's hard to separate the signal. And I think what we really look for are entrepreneurs that have insight into a clinical problem, a solution they've identified, and frankly, deep enough expertise where they're thinking down the road about all the different stakeholders and the ways in which something has to be adopted, and working backwards from there, what you have to do to execute on that plan. It's really it's sharing, frankly, the entrepreneur to me, to have that insight and they've kind of thought through all these things. But similarly, you know, an openness to talking about the idea and the concept and taking some feedback, and frankly, being open-minded about maybe it's not quite this application, it's one just adjacent to it. Or, you know, if we think about pursuing this product opportunity along this path, there may be a couple of things we could also do that frankly may require more money, for example, and that's okay. But thinking through how to convert an idea into a company, it just requires a lot of time and thought. I think the more opportunities you have to speak with investors, frankly, other potential, you know, collaborators in the market, even frankly competitors in some ways. Sometimes getting the insight from a bigger company that may be in your space doesn't have your innovation per se, and ideally they couldn't go and replicate that easily. But really understanding how they see the commercial landscape today, and it can inform how you might think about where you need to get to and anticipate where they're going to want to be. All those are really valuable inputs, and the more you get that fleshed out, I think the more compelling the story is.
Good input. Bob, any quick
Yeah,
advice?
I would just say, you know, first and foremost, we invest in people. You know, at the end of the day, success in building a company is all about the people. You know, it's, you know, back to Myra's unreasonable man. And I will, at the very end, I'll tell a short story about that, because that quote bailed me out about 20 years ago, and it's been my saving grace for many years. But, you know, we fundamentally invest in people. You know, can we work with these folks? Are they the domain masters? Do they bring a unique understanding of the market, of a problem, of a solution around which we can build value? You know, do they have personalities? Do they have, you know, characters that allow us to work together where we really can become partners? Because we view ourselves not as a financier, but as a partner in executing on a vision to build a business. So those are the foremost things that we probably look at. Number 2 is how well do they understand the domain, and how pragmatic, how realistic are they as they think through the domain. The question is do we have to totally reset, you know, or can we work with where they are? Are they open to coaching? Are they open to guidance? You know, can you have that open conversation with them? If you can't, then it's probably not going to be a fit for us. You know, because part of what we bring is not capital. Frankly, the most valuable part of what we bring is a lot of experience and a lot of expertise and very broad and deep networks. And those things turn out to be, you know, vital if you're executing on an idea to build a company. If we can't translate that, if we can't share that successfully with an entrepreneur, then we're not delivering the value, and in fact, we're not reducing the risk. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, our job is to build value, but in the process to reduce risk at every step in every way we possibly can. So we look for that combination of skills and personality within the entrepreneurs that we work with.
Well, good advice and good feedback and background on your investment strategies. And with that, I think we're going to unfortunately have to close, but they will be around all morning, so I'm sure you can ask them your individual questions off to the side. So thank you very much.
One more comment from Ira. This is really important. You picked my absolute favorite quote, right? And I found that quote 20 years ago, actually about 25 years ago, when people kept telling me I was unreasonable. So I found George Bernard Shaw, who bailed me out, and I took it one step further, which was, when people say you're being unreasonable, my retort was, well, according to George Bernard Shaw, perhaps you've heard of him, I am unreasonable, and I may be the key to the salvation of the species, so just say thank you.